Do you want to build a villain? It kinda has to be a villain. Hey guys, MasakoX here. We all know about the Dragon Ball heroes, right? No, I'm not talking about the game, I'm talking about the actual heroes in the show that we have watched for probably coming up to 20 years. They've got plenty of coverage in my eyes, a little too much if you ask me. So today, we're going to be looking at the other end of that spectrum, the Dragon Ball villains. Now imagine that as a video game. We're going to try and look at what makes a typical Dragon Ball villain and actually come up with our very own based on the archetypes that have gone before. We're creating a negative entity, a nemesis, the kind of villain that we would have loved to have seen in Super, or maybe in a future Dragon Ball series further down the line. Okay, but why the drive, Masako, for a new villain? Usually you play good guys. Well, it's all down to the fact that we've had a recent new villain added to the Dragon Ball mix in the form of fighters. Love that game, by the way. And this was all started off about a few months ago when Android 21 was announced. And she's actually billed to be the lead antagonist in the game. And this is all down to ArcSys' style of adding a new custom character, an original character to every single game that they do. So this is just following that trend. They asked Toriyama to come up with a new villain, and so he obliged. In the weeks that followed her announcement, more and more information came out about her, and our intrigue began to grow and grow. What kind of villain was she going to be? Is she going to be following the trends of like Dr. Gero? Maybe a little bit of Frieza, Majin Buu? What kind of things from the past will be incorporated into the villain of now? In any case, this is the perfect opportunity for us to come up with a baddie design for Dragon Ball. However, for the purposes of the dissection, we're not going to be actually looking at movie villains, for example, or the likes of Beerus and Jiren to a certain degree. But Masako, the movie villains were really cool and deserve coverage! Yes, I understand your thoughts, and indeed, some of those designs are kinda cool, and in some cases, cooler. But the real reason that I'm not going to be talking about them in great length today is because their main motivation for existing is just to basically prop up a 50-minute movie, come up with something vaguely terrifying based on the past from the series, and then ultimately be defeated by Goku. The TV and manga villains, though, are far more complex. They have to be. There is so much more to them that has to keep them going for several chapters or even several volumes just to keep people interested. Beerus and Jiren aren't exactly villains when it comes to these regards because they're just more like the opposition for a particular arc. Jiren, for example, he's not a bad guy. He's just the lead opposition against Goku in the universe survival arc. As for Beerus, well, he's basically chaotic neutral. He's just doing his job as the god of destruction, and ultimately, he kind of knows which bed to lay in, and that's one with Goku. Expect a lot of crumbs. So instead, we'll take a look at the big bads from the likes of Dragon Ball, Z, GT, and Super. Our focus today will start with the likes of King Piccolo, who was the first real big bad guy of the entire franchise, and going from the likes of Vegeta to some cases. Then we got Frieza, Cell, Buu, Baby Omega Shenron, and then of course Goku Black Zamasu, that whole spiel. So what do these guys have in common? They all transform. And yes, I'm including King Piccolo's transformation of becoming young thanks to the Dragon Balls because it is a change in his state from being old to becoming young, so that counts. Yes, I know it may seem a little bit obvious to you, but it is so obvious in fact that it would be a bit of a crime that I didn't even talk about it whatsoever. Pretty much every single villain has some kind of transformation, one transformation, and in some cases, they actually have more than one. And of course, they all love to monologue, because who doesn't want a villain that likes talking about themselves and loving the sound of their own voice? And yeah, it's been a real while since we've had a bad guy that's truly had a multi-form transformation, not just the one. So let's give our bad guy that. Probably less than the likes of Majin Buu, because that was nuts. There's at least, I don't know, like 8 different variations of Majin Buu? Maybe about 3 transformations. That seems about right. That seems pretty stable. And just like with Perfect Cell, with the Super Perfect Cell form, we can keep the last transformation for the very end, just to keep people on their toes. Now that the transformations are out of the way, let's actually settle on a theme for our evildoer. Okay, we've had a Demon King, you know, King Piccolo. Well, I mean, technically that's more of like an evil slug man, but hey, ignorance is bliss. A Space Emperor / Galactic Landshark. A monstrous amalgamation, a chaotic genie. A biological instrument of violence, aka Space Cell. An evil dragon, well, technically that's several evil dragons, and a double whammy of a fallen Kai plus the evil twin. And if you really want to get loose with the definitions, you could also include the wizard in there in the form of BADDIE. But the thing about that was, though, is that BADDIE wasn't the ultimate villain. He was basically carrying the beginnings of the Majin Buu arc before Buu got bored of him. However, BADDIE did do one thing that most villains do. He had minions, and he directed them to great effect. Most notably with the likes of Dabura. We've actually not really had, for a very long time, a bad guy that's had a huge case of minions behind them. And we're not counting the likes of Resurrection F, because that's more like a rehash of what's gone before. I'm talking about a brand new team of minions to help out our big bad. It's really cool to have an army of minions. Why? Diversity. Why exactly? Well, you can have so many colorful characters that you don't have to really think about too much. You can off them pretty quickly, or even have the B team go up against them, or even in some cases the A team go against them, just to kind of give some interesting flavors to the mix. Like, it could be ideas for a bad guy that didn't quite make it to the ultimate big bad, but you can still have some fun and experiment. And besides, it's a perfect way to pad out the arc without anybody hating you. Not only that, but some of those minions can actually generate really impressive fan bases on their own. This cannot be glossed over. The Ginyu Force is probably one of the most recognizable and iconic minion teams that any kind of villain in any form of modern media that's ever had. Because when you think of Dragon Ball, they say, come up with a minion. The Ginyu Force? Yeah, it's the first thing that comes to mind. And it's not just about their powers, it's for their unique and flamboyant poses and stuff like that. Well, okay, MasakoX, so if BADDIE hasn't done the wizard theme proud, then why don't you just touch upon it again? Well, I think we'll do just that. But maybe add a bit more of a twist to make it a bit more substantial, something a bit more evil. A wizard isn't inherently evil, but a warlock or a warlord could be. Maybe this guy can hail from planet Sadala in Universe 6, and the perfect hook for our Saiyans of Universe 7 to go and visit the Universe 6 realm and actually build up a new arc in a new series. And yeah, this is the perfect thing. We need a big bad there, not just like a 3-episode mini arc where you go like, hi, bye to the people of Universe 6. That would be so poor. Not only is it a brand new type of villain that we've not really explored before in the Dragon Ball main series, but it also means we get some character progression from the good side as well. Since we've had many scrawny looking magical people in Dragon Ball, maybe it's time to subvert the subversion. Most people will be thinking, oh, Toriyama's going to do something completely different, really something we wouldn't expect. Well, how about he subverts that thinking by just doing something that is particularly conventional and not something we'd expect at the same time. We could go really big for our Warlock. Maybe something similar to the likes of Thanos or Darkseid from the Marvel DC comic book realms. Toriyama really does enjoy his movies, especially the sci-fi ones, so if we had a little nod to the Avengers or, the Justice League franchise, I think this would actually make sense. That being said, I would like to keep the pure wizard theme around in some capacity. Maybe not the main villain, but there's also, with many people, like a second in command. So maybe we can make the wizard that second in command, like Zarbon or Dodoria. This guy could be the rather traitorous type, someone who's sick and tired of this master getting all the glory and he wants some of it for himself, and he thinks that his power is good enough to take him on. And yes, I know this is a common pop culture trend that's been around for, forever. Starscream from Transformers, anyone? But it would be something new for the likes of Dragon Ball. And if I remember correctly, I don't think there have been any second-in-commands in Dragon Ball that's tried to usurp the power of the leader in that before. I could be wrong, but let me know in the comments. Now okay, with that comes an interesting thought. How about Goku and Vegeta having to team up with the main villain to take on the second-in-command that somehow got some real power and gone rogue and stuff like that, and the villain needs to basically put him down and have to rely on the heroes? Maybe we can have some plot progression here. Maybe we can have it so that means the bad guy, his intentions become more clear to Goku and Vegeta, and it becomes less simple in order to destroy him. There's something going on that makes people think, well, hang on, maybe he's not all that crazy. Now in terms of personality, I think this guy would be actually quite honourable, because Frieza's quite honourable, Cell's quite honourable, really honourable in fact. Also, like with many villains in the series, he'd be very keen on improving himself, and you could even throw the antagonist Hit, who's now obviously quite clearly on Goku's side, into the mix, because he is the ultimate embodiment of improvement. Granted, this guy might be a respectable character, but that wouldn't make him a sympathetic character. Our little thought experiment is about coming up with a villain that would come after the Tournament of Power. Something that would happen in either a movie or a new series, and this is after the moment we've had good versus good versus good versus good versus good, like times 60. And I don't think we're going to be in store for one of those for a very long time. And especially after the likes of Zamasu trying to justify himself as the ultimate good guy with his whole justice spiel. It was a really confused motivation that seemed to be quite relatable to us, or at least tried to be, but it ultimately turned into a complete hot mess by the end of the arc. And if you can't really have anyone go like, that villain's not so bad, or there's something about him that really gets under your skin and you remember him, then you kind of failed. Had Zamasu been more subtle when it comes to talking about justice, I think he would have been a much more successful villain. He'd have been someone going through a genuine existential crisis, instead of just being a justice soapbox on legs. Now that I think about it though, after all these average or brooding baddies, I think it's about time that we basically had one of those classic big bads that everyone can really understand from the get-go, of all ages, and someone who can throw a really big punch. Think Pacific Rim, really. Now, speaking of punches, we should be thinking about the fighting style of this guy and the techniques that he might use. And yes, I said that I wanted to make a straightforward villain archetype, but we really don't want to have just yet another Jiren, because that is too simple. Yes, I know Jiren's not a villain, but he's still the lead antagonist in this arc, so okay, we'll talk about him for just a second. I was originally thinking about someone who had sound-based powers. You know, a kind of villain that could mess with our heroes' perceptions and kind of change their aspect and outlook on life. Something like Echoes from Diamond is Unbreakable, that could be really cool. Messing around with Goku's mind, that could really provide some compelling storytelling. At the same time though, that could really become one-dimensional rather quickly, so maybe that might be best to give to their second in command or a very major minion. And another problem I'm having with the fighting style though is because we've really had a key-heavy based villain for the longest time, especially with likes of Goku Black and Zamasu. And yes, I know, Goku Black, and in some cases Zamasu, was derived from a character, Goku, who has a lot of key-based attacks, so that can be forgiven in some way. But you still got to be careful though, because we don't want to have to repeat the same theme for several months at a time. Then we have to address the elephant in the room. Something that has been really interesting for the longest time, but has been going on for a year, and could prove to be any other villain designer's undoing going forward, and that is the Tournament of Power. With so many fighters in that arc, it'd be very hard not to repeat yourself in a future one. We run the risk of having a bad guy with some kind of power, and then somebody out there is going to say, that guy reminds me of that person from the Tournament of Power. Yawn, boring. It's a real tough one, but I think I have an answer. I think we would give our lawfully evil Warlock the power to control his own environment. He could use the space around him as a weapon. You know, giant stone fists, tossing asteroids at people, creating earthquakes, and then, here's a little twist here, I think we would also give him the power of instant transmission. Just because Goku has it doesn't mean other people can't have it either. Well, we didn't see much of Jimizu in the Tournament of Power, so I think we should address instant transmission and the Yardrat race again. Hey, maybe this evil Warlock is from the planet Yardrat, and he's come to teach Goku a lesson and wishes to test his strength about the only other person who isn't a Yardratian having mastered this technique. So what we've managed to create is an evil Warlock with an army of minions, possibly a menace to Universes 6 and 7, a master of arena traps and AoE attacks, who has a plan to conquer and gain more power, and of course challenge Goku. It feels pretty classic, and all of you Vegeta fans out there, I've not forgotten about you. A character like that could provide great progression for Vegeta. He would get to fight alongside Kaba. That whole thread of plot could be addressed. The plotline would be centered around the planet Sadala in some way. So by proxy, Vegeta would be one of the major roles in the arc. Maybe some of the Universe 6 Saiyans could figure in this as well, and some of the generals of this evil Warlock could be taken out by them. Who knows, or dares to dream? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our little creative villain game that we came up with. If you like the sound of it, maybe we can do some more of them. But I want to know what you guys think. What kind of villain would you like to see in Dragon Ball, and how do you think they would work going forward in the franchise? Leave a comment below, and let's get this discussion going. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Until the next one, be sure to like and subscribe. Catch you later!